Hi everybody. Today we're going to have a look at making some tavern tiles with magnetic connections. We're going to be using dollar store foam core, both with the easy peel paper and without. First we're going to start by cutting a whole bunch of 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch tiles and one 2.5 inch by 5 inch tile and one 5 by 5 tile. We're going to cut both of these. We're going to cut two sets of these, one with the easy peel paper and one without the easy peel paper. The squares with easy peel paper will become the floor surface of our tiles. We're also going to need several half-inch wide strips. These will become the stub walls around our tiles that have walls. I'm going to peel the paper off of all of the easy peel tiles that we make in preparation for texturing them to look like wood floors. Some dollar stores sell foam core that has easy peel paper, and this is great because we can carve into the styrofoam after the paper is removed and texture it to look like whatever we want. Here I am just peeling the paper off a few of the tiles. And pinching off any little bits that are still left. I'm not going to peel all of these squares for you, just a couple, and then we'll show you how to texture them to make it look like wood flooring. And we can accomplish this with a straight edge, ballpoint pen, and mechanical pencil. I'm going to use 1/4 inch planks. I'm just marking on the side here very lightly some 1/4 inch marks. You can see the tiles nice and square. I'm going to use my X-Acto knife and I'm going to score the top surface of the styrofoam just a little bit. And here I'm using an extra square of foam core just to balance the ruler so that it doesn't rock and make a lot of noise. I take my time and line up those marks carefully and just give them a quick score with my utility knife. I don't want to cut all the way through the styrofoam. I don't want to cut all the way through to the paper. I just want to score it a little bit. Get all of the marks scored. And here we're just making a tile with parallel planks. After we score it, we're going to come back with our ballpoint pen and we're going to run it through those scores to deepen the score mark and chamfer the edges of each plank. This gives us a more defined division between the planks and gives us a little bit better visual pop when it's on the table 2.5 or 3 feet away. Then we're going to take a mechanical pencil and we're just going to score into the top of the styrofoam some light grooves to mimic the wood texturing of a wood floor. And here I'm going with sort of a random pattern. Some of the score marks will be diagonal, some of them will be along the length of the plank. I'm going to alternate directions where I can just to add visual interest and a dynamic feel to the tile. Please pardon my hair poking into the frame. Good chance to put on some righteous tunes and groove out to the zen of texturing. Maybe throw on the entire Avengers cycle on streaming, or the director's cut of both the Hobbit movies and the Lord of the Rings movies. This will take a bit of time, but it's worth it in the end. Once we get to painting these tiles, you'll see how much this texturing really pops out and makes them look really good. So these parallel planks work well in a gridless system. You don't have to have a grid if you're playing. Some people don't like it, some people do. Here I'm just adding a little bit of watered down black acrylic paint in a wash to show you how that texturing really pops out the wood grain look of these planks that I've engraved with my mechanical pencil. And all of these squares have to be textured eventually, but we're not going to do that right now. You guys don't need to watch me texturize all of these squares. We'll do another one though. This one is going to be marked out in a grid system. So I'm using a 2.5 by 2.5 inch square, which means each of the grid squares will have to be 1.25 inches. I'm just marking out the main divisions here so that I can align the rest of the planking to visually react with this grid system. Using an extra square of foam core, a couple extra squares of foam core to keep my ruler from rocking and making noise. And I'm just going to score lightly to create the grid. Just get them, take your time and line up the marks as closely as you can. I'm kind of cheating a little bit here. I'm using the base marking on my cutting mat and the grid lines on the cutting mat as well to make sure that it lines up pretty closely here. It's a nice easy way to double check your work. And we're just going to bevel those with the ballpoint pen again, just like we did before. Now, to enhance the grid look, I'm going to go with a bit of a parquet look here. So each square is going to have alternating directions of 1/4 inch planking. And here I am just lightly marking the sides where all of that parquet work will go. Now, when doing a parquet grid system, it's very important that all of your tiles are set up the same way. So the bottom left corner of the tile, when it's sat on the table facing you like this, needs to always be the same. And if you always do the bottom left corner first, deciding direction there, and then alternate back and forth with all of the other parquet squares, when you line your tiles up together and attach them using the magnets, the parquet squares will all look like they were designed to be that way. And here I am, I'm just lightly marking on the top which direction I want the planks to go so that I don't get confused later. You don't have to do this. It's very easy to determine what you should be doing from previously scored sections, but for on camera, this is just a nice way to enhance the visual. I'm just lining up my extra squares so that the ruler is nice and flat, and then I'm going to get to scoring. Make sure I only score the part of the tile where the arrows are in the direction that my score marks are going. And I don't want to cut all the way through again, I just want to score lightly on the top. Take your time. Be careful with the knife, it's sharp. Just imagine how long the walk is from the Shire to Mordor and Mount Doom, and then think about all the detours the hobbits made on their way. See, I'm alternating, only scoring in the direction of my arrows. Taking the time to do this for all of your tiles will really make the parquet style of the floor pop. And if you like to play on a grid system, then this will make it very easy to spot the grid from across the table. I'm just flipping it around. lining it up along with the grid on my cutting mat so that I try and get those marks as square as possible. Minor deviations are not terrible, but really for consistency's sake, you want to take your time and try and line these up as carefully as you can. It might seem tedious now, but it'll pay off in the end. The final product will really pop out and look great. A couple more squares and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Some people like to use a wire brush or something to brush in wood grain, and I've seen good results online with that, but I don't have a wire brush right now, so I'm going to go with a mechanical pencil technique. It takes a little bit more time. And here we go, we've got all the score marks in, I believe, and it's time to, time to bevel those with the pen. And this just adds extra definition between each of these little planks and allows that detail to pop out a little bit more in the final painting stage. Just making sure I get all right up to the previously beveled parquet squares. Sometimes the pen leaves ink in the grooves and sometimes it doesn't. I don't worry too much about that. That'll all be taken care of in the painting stages anyway. And there we go. You can see how that's lining up nicely as a parquet effect. And now I'm just going to take the mechanical pencil and scribe in some wood grain effects again. When we get to the final painting and dry brushing stage of these tiles, you'll see how taking the time to do this with a mechanical pencil really makes the grain on these planks pop. And you only really have to do it once per tile set that you make. And I'm just pushing lightly. I'm kind of trying to hold the tip of the pencil at a shallow angle so that it's scribing into the styrofoam and not tearing chunks out. A few chunks torn out is okay. It looks like wear and tear over time, but too much of that and really it's going to detract from the finished look that you're desiring for your tiles. Just alternate directions on each neighboring plank so that the eye is drawn to that difference and it pops it out, makes it look good. You're going to be doing a lot of these, so making many of them look similar is not a bad idea. It adds uniformity to the field of the floor once it's all laid out, put together. And again, pardon the corner of my hair poking into the screen there. And that looks good. A few more to do. Once we get this all inscribed and engraved with the wood grain look, we'll be ready to move on to the next step. I would probably factor in a couple of days total to get this done. If you're making, I'm making, I don't know, 36 odd tiles with three different sizes, so 2 days, maybe 2 days. Still have all these to do, but I'm not going to do them on camera. I'll do them in the background playing music. You guys don't need to watch that. A little more black wash to show off the engraving. It's just a cheap dollar store craft brush from a variety pack that I'm using. You can kind of get the feel for the engraving as it pops out on the grain there. A little bit of herringbone pattern. Some of those planks. And it looks like bottom right corner I forgot to engrave. You can see the difference there. They're smoother planks, and you could go that way if you wanted to. Once you dry brush them, they kind of resemble wood anyway. Now we're going to make several different kinds of tiles. Field tiles won't have any walls. We're going to make some single wall tiles. Just one wall, glued to the edge. I like to use relative dimensions here to trim because these tiles are not going to be accurate to within a micron, and so if we actually line each piece of wall up to the tile itself, we'll get cut walls that actually fit the tile itself. It eliminates a little bit of human error for doing mass production of cuts and whatnot. Then this way everything matches up nicely and there's no gaps between tiles caused by little stubs of wall sticking out. Check the edge, make sure it's nice and smooth. I'm going to use my hot glue gun and glue that on. Clean out the nozzle with a little drop and then run a nice thin bead down the edge of the wall that I like least. Just a little bit. You don't want too much squeezing out here. And you got a little bit of time to move it into place and make sure it's nicely lined up. Rub any squeeze out off. Try not to burn yourself on the hot glue. Just holding it in place while the glue hardens a little bit. And then scrape a little bit off with a craft stick. I want that squeeze out of there because I don't want it to cause the next stage to space out too much. And there's a single wall tile. Good for the perimeter of larger rooms. And here we're going to make a corner tile. And necessarily this one is just going to have two different wall lengths because one of the walls is going to eat into a little bit of the space of the tile. I'm just going to mark the relative dimension there. Give it a slice. And start with the most squarely cut smooth end of your strips. That way all your cuts will look nice. Find the best face and make sure it's pointing upwards. Little dab of glue. And we're going to attach it to one of the sides. Pardon my hair. Just maneuver it in so it's nicely lined up. Craft stick to peel off any squeeze out. And you'll get the hang of this pretty quickly. I mean, you'll learn after a couple of these just how little glue it takes to stick them on right now and to help eliminate some of that tear out, squeeze out. And then here I'm using this craft stick to line up why this wall is a little bit shorter because the first wall eats into the tile space a little bit. I'm going to use that relative dimension, lining it up with the actual tile and then cut so that it all fits very nicely. And take several passes. This will help prevent tearing the styrofoam inside the foam core and give you nice smooth edges. And I'm going to glue that on the other wall. A little bit on the end as well, so that the two walls bond together. Two axes of control, as Wylock would say. Looking good, as DM Scotty would say. And now we're going to do a dead end, which is going to have 3 walls on it. I get that relative dimension and mark it. Cut with several passes, following the grid lines on my cutting mat. Find the best edge, make sure that it's up. Thin bead of glue. And we'll attach it to the tile. Look, there's my glasses and a little bit of my hair again. Get it nicely lined up so that it all looks good when it's put together with the rest of the tiles. Check for squeeze out. We'll do another wall. Relative dimension to the inside of that first wall. It's going to be a little bit shorter, this one. Just fling those tiles around when I don't need them. Get into the flow state and things start to get a little less organized in the background. Check for the best edge, make sure it's up. A little bit of glue on the edges that are going to be contacting the other wall and the base tile. Just a little bit. And there's my head and my glasses. Pardon my hair. Nice cowlick, eh? I'm just going to hold it down for a second, let the glue harden a bit. And you can see here that I made that wall just a touch long, but it's okay. I can come in and slice the last little bit off really easily. Make sure your knife is sharp. Fresh blades are important. I have just enough left to make that third wall. Look for the best edge, make sure it's up. Little dab will do you. Attach it to the tile and get it nicely lined up while that glue is soft, and then just hold it for a second and let the glue harden up. There we go. 3 of the 4 types of tiles we're going to make. Now we're going to mark the placement for the buckyball magnets. I have gotten a bunch of these little ball magnets that you can find all over the place. People use them for crafting and all kinds of stuff. What I like about the ball magnets is that they can handle the polarity all on their own if we plan ahead and set it up correctly. Right now I'm just marking the halfway point on any tile sides that do not have a wall. I don't need magnets on the wall sides. And really I'm just double checking marks that I previously made here. You can see the previous marks. And so what we're going to do now is we're just going to gouge a little bucket for the magnet to sit inside. Using our utility knife, I'm going to score a little rectangular little opening, and the magnet's going to sit right inside there. I find making little rectangular openings the most effective. Just nip the 2 sides and then clip out the chunk of styrofoam in the middle. You do 2 of these and you'll be a master at it. And I'll pull one of the round magnets off of our pile there. I think these are 5 millimeter, no, 3 millimeter magnets. It's very important though, we don't want to glue these magnets in place. We just want them to sit in there, and you can see that I'm checking it with my finger to make sure it rotates freely. And that's good. If it'll rotate freely, that means when I push the tiles together, those magnets will rotate inside their little pockets and line up north-south polarity automatically. I don't have to worry about it. Just use the corner of my knife and pop out that little chunk of styrofoam. Grab a magnet. Pop it in there. Make sure it rotates freely. And that it doesn't protrude. And on to the next one. Now, in terms of how many of these you should make, I find that the corner tiles are the most needed. There's another magnet, popping it in. You need a corner in you need 4 corners in a room, essentially. Unless you're making octagonal rooms, and then you need diagonal tiles, and we'll get into those later, perhaps, in a future episode. For a standard square room, you're either going to need a corner tile, or you're going to need to back up a single wall tile against the backside of another tile that has a wall. So I made about 16 corner tiles, and about 8 single wall tiles, and a couple of dead ends, and a couple of bigger tiles. Figured I might want to have several different rooms available to me. So I craft an inn or a monastery or a fairly complex structure out of the selection of tiles that I have without having to resort to the craft table again too quickly. You see, checking for free rotation there. Couple more and we'll be ready for the next step. And it's really easy. Clip on either side, about 2.5 millimeters away from the center mark. Poke in the point of the knife and then just gouge out the little chunk of styrofoam to make room for the magnet. You can pull it out with your fingers if you need to. Pop in a magnet, check for rotation. Pardon my hair again. Check for rotation. There we go. 3 tiles set to go. And I still have a bunch of magnets left. Now we're going to start to assemble the tiles. We're going to use hot glue to glue the texturized pieces of foam core that we peeled the paper off of onto and above the magnets on these tile bases. And this does a couple of things. It gives us the wood texture on top of the tile once it's painted up. It looks good. It encapsulates the magnets in the tile. Here you can see that the 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch square that I made originally is a little bit too big. That's because the wall takes up a little bit of space. That's okay, I'll trim it off. And then that protruding section on the wall above the floor texturing allows me to clip on doors and other clip-on features as Wylock describes them. Brings the room to life. And now I'm using some craft paper that I got from a legal pad, and I'm gluing that around the edge just to contain the magnets so that they can't pop out. They've got to stay in there. But it's very, very important that we don't get glue on the magnet because we want it to be able to freely rotate inside of that pocket so that when 2 tiles are pushed together, the magnets can find north-south polarity on their own. Just going to pinch the corners to fold it. Add some glue. Make sure not to get any on the tile, or pardon me, not to get any glue on the magnet. And push the paper down and let the glue harden. Smooth it out a little bit. Again, magnet can rotate freely inside there. And I'll clip the extra off with some snips. And that tile's ready for painting and finishing. Pick off any squeeze out or extra glue, hot glue that's showing there, just so that we don't get any gaps. And now I'm going to coat it with black painted Mod Podge. This is a tip that I got from Jeremy from Black Magic Craft. All credit to him for the idea that I adopted. When you paint this on the craft paper cladding that holds the magnets, there might be a little bit of warpage and bubbling at the beginning because there's some moisture in this product, and that'll cause the fibers in the paper to expand. But once it dries, it'll go back to being pretty flat. Just don't inundate it. And make sure you get all sides and edges. This will also strengthen up the foam core and make it a little more durable. Strengthen up your tiles and make them more durable. But make sure you don't apply too much, because you don't want to fill in all of the textured detail that you added to the tops. And here we're going to start painting our tiles, and I'm going to start with a fairly liberal coating of a darkish brown color. This is a color called Coffee Bean. It happened to be the only medium brown, dark brown color available in a larger bottle at my craft store at the time, so I picked it up. Not too fussy about the actual name of the color. I just need darks, mids, and highlights. I'm going to cover most of the top of the tile. Not too worried about the bottom. We won't see the bottoms of these tiles. And here I am dry brushing it with a medium tan called Camel. I've gone for about 66 to 75% coverage. I still want to see some of that brown. I still want to see some of the black in the deeper grooves. And here you can see how the parquet really pops with the different directions of the herringbone in the wood tone. And there, the bottom left, I did not engrave it. And you can see that it still works a little bit, but I'm going to come back and give it a little quick engravement. Even after the Mod Podge and the paint, it'll still work. And a little bit more dry brush, and you can see that you can still see that texture in there. So black, brown, and tan so far. Now what I'm going to do, I'll continue to dry brush the rest of these tiles. This one's a little bit wet, so it gets a little bit muddy. Really a good idea to wait until your tiles are really dry from the previous coat before you start the dry brush process. Otherwise it gets a little muddled in there. And hit the top of the wall a little bit. And then I'm also going to paint the inside of the wall. It's kind of the stucco plaster look. Gives a little contrast between the interior walls and the floor. Doesn't have to be perfect. Daubing it in to get rid of brush marks. And I'm coming back to do the interior of that wall as well. Kind of working design decisions on the fly here as I go along. Touch of dry brushing on this one, so it's off screen. I'm going to add some orange into this tan color. This gives kind of an illusion of light playing across the top of the wooden flooring. I like a reflected lantern or candle light. And it adds a little bit of visual interest. In this one, I don't want to cover everything. I just want to cover maybe a third to a half. I don't want to overpower the wood look with too much of this orangey orangeness, but a little bit of it really adds to the effect of light patch glows on the floor, on the interior. There we go. All dried up. Now I'm going to add a little bit of a brown wash, which is just dish soap, water, and brown craft paint. I'm going to add that to the stucco part of the walls. Just a quick little slathering. Nothing fancy. Just add a little visual interest to that once it all dries up. Sometimes it's just these little extra details or little extra processes that add to the whole presentation at the end. And now I've taken all this time to make these tiles look really nice with the painting and dry brushing and washing. So I'm going to add a coat of matte finish Mod Podge to the top of this just to keep the paint intact and protect it from wear and tear of storage and play, right? You got minis going around on this and they get chucked into buckets and bins and drawers when they're not in use. And this extra step will just make sure they last as long as possible without having to require further maintenance. It doesn't take long. Just slather it in. Not too worried about filling all the channels at this point because they're all colored and dry brushed and weathered nicely. You could probably use PVA glue or watered down PVA glue to stretch it a little bit, but I've got the Mod Podge on hand and I like it. Gonna use it. And this second layer will also add additional rigidity to the styrofoam on the tiles. One more to go. TM Scotty would probably say something like, nice, or looking good here. Wylock would say, why did you ruin my Wylock style tavern tiles? And here I can see the magnets. Well, I had to push that one in and the magnet rotated, and now we've got a little room. And we can populate it with some tables and chairs. I'm going to make those in upcoming videos. And some crates that I made out of wooden cubes from the dollar store. I'm going to make those in an upcoming video. Stack them up, add some interest. Probably need some kegs too, and maybe a bar. Possibly a fireplace. There's one of the chairs. You'll see how simple these are to make and how effective they are once I get to that part of the video, once we get to that future video. Thanks for joining me for magnetic Wylock style tavern tiles. Here they are with some minis for scale. You can see how those chairs look. And the crates. A little bit of Mod Podge still drying there. But the top surface isn't sticky, so it's all good. Make enough of these and you can set up your own internal spaces. Thanks for joining me. Catch you next time.